The Israel Philharmonic Orchestra started not by an act of government or of a few musicians getting together and say, let's start an orchestra, but rather it was a vision. It was a vision of one man alone, the great Polish violinist Bronisław Huberman. One has to imagine Europe in the beginning of the 30s. Hitler has already come into power in 1933. Jewish musicians are emigrating from Europe, mostly towards America. And Huberman, being a great Zionist, wants to start this orchestra in Palestine. Emigrating from Nazi Germany, from pre-Nazi Poland, from the Ukraine, and from Austria to Palestine was not a cruise. But by December of 1936, he not only formed one of the great orchestras of the world in Palestine, but he convinced Arturo Toscanini to conduct its first concert. And I had the great privilege a few years ago, when the orchestra celebrated its 40th anniversary, to conduct the identical program Toscanini did on its first night. And here we are playing Weber's Oberon Overture with the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. The Israel Philharmonic has played under the greatest conductors in the world ever since its inception. There is one, though, who has never stopped coming, and that is Leonard Bernstein. At its 50th anniversary, the orchestra asked Mr. Bernstein to compose a piece for them, and he surely did. Jubilee Games, 1986. Leonard Bernstein has been associated with the Israel Philharmonic since the late 40s. One of the historic occasions when he conducted the orchestra was after the Six-Day War in 1967 on Mount Scopus, Mahler's Second Symphony.
This is no ordinary city. This is Yerushalayim. This is the very center of faith. Let it spread. Let the walls come down. And then we can say in truth, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah udvar Adonai Yerushalayim.
Like so many others, I wanted to go to Israel as soon as I heard of the fighting. But by the time I could get there, the war had ended. With the war's end came the idea for a special concert on Mount Scopus, a solemn moment dedicated to the reunification of Jerusalem. And for this, no music seemed more appropriately symbolic than Mahler's Resurrection Symphony. This Resurrection Symphony has become almost a national anthem here in Israel, perhaps because it's a metaphor for all that has happened in Israel and to Jews throughout history. The ancient cycle of threat, destruction, human suffering, and rebirth is all mirrored here in Mahler's music. And above all, the expression of simple faith, the deep belief that good must triumph. Ein Brera, as they say here. There is no alternative.
It's unbelievable how this orchestra, which was founded in 1936 from a bunch of tired, exhausted refugees, called the Palestine Symphony Orchestra, which they were when I first knew them. I was a little boy, and they were a little orchestra. 11 years old, right? The orchestra was 11 years old. And we had a real love affair.
Not only Leonard Bernstein and some of the finest conductors have appeared with this orchestra, but the greatest soloists of this century, Jascha Heifetz, Gregor Piatigorsky, and of course Arthur Rubinstein. He has played with the orchestra not only in Israel but on tour in Europe, in America. Here he is doing his last recording with an orchestra, Brahms Concerto No. 1 in D minor.
The orchestra is very dear to me, and it plays really, I must tell you quite honestly, that's not a compliment for the orchestra or for the country, for anything. As a musician, I don't know any sort of what we say prejudice, you know, preferences or something like that. The orchestra is first class, and under the conductorship of a man like Meitat, plays absolutely beautifully.
Arthur Rubinstein was certainly one of the most unique artists of this century. Recently, the Israel Philharmonic celebrated his centenary when Daniel Barenboim ended the whole feast of music with Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto in B-flat. Even though the orchestra bears the name of the country, it's Tel Aviv where they really are at home. Tel Aviv is the big apple of Israel. And its mayor, Shlomo Lahat, is one of our biggest fans, never misses a concert, even drops in on rehearsals sometimes, and we have to stop him from conducting.
I never like to do anything which I don't think...
Tell us how you conduct the city of Tel Aviv. These are all your citizens.
I hate to do anything which I don't think that
You have a stiff wrist.
Is it good to conduct a band?
And talking of theatrics, not far away from here used to be the Israel National Opera, just on the way to Jaffa there. The opera doesn't exist anymore, but we at the Israel Philharmonic do sometimes, although it costs us a lot of money, go into a concert performance and even sometimes stage operas. Here's Leona Mitchell doing a little of both from Madame Butterfly. This is what we would call the national instrument of the Jewish people. I once asked the concertmaster of the Israel Philharmonic, why is it that Jews play more violin than any other instrument? He says, it's very simple. It's very easy to pick it up and run. Tragic as that may sound, it has certainly produced the greatest violinists of the world. One of our dearest friends, the one who plays with the orchestra as often as we want and as often as he wants, is Isaac Stern, here playing a part of Max Bruch's Violin Concerto. Almost 2 generations away from Isaac Stern is a young violinist just burning up the violin repertoire today, Shlomo Mintz. Mention Israel and violin, and what name comes to your mind? That's right. Itzhak Perlman playing Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto on a very special occasion. The Tchaikovsky Concerto, which we have performed umpteen times all over the world, is a very special occasion for all of us because at the invitation of the government of Poland, the Israel Philharmonic is performing for the first time ever behind the Iron Curtain, the first concert with Itzhak Perlman as soloist. Having played in most Central European capitals, Warsaw was certainly one of the most important. From Warsaw, we were invited to go to Katowice, where we performed Brahms' Second Symphony. Traveling by train in Poland brings back acute memories to many of us. Avraham Melamed especially is a survivor of a death camp.
Well, the reflections, of course, that are coming back are how I survived from the concentration camp. And it was in great part through this instrument. And in the other part of my father, who was a genius, a master in the science of survival. He never gave up hope, not for one day. And every day he knew exactly how to find a way to survive. Our luck was that in the concentration camp that we were brought, the commander of the camp, he was a musician. He was a very good musician. And when he heard about me, I was at that time 9 years old. I was brought to him and I played for him. I knew I was going on this train, and I woke up today at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I think that on this very same railroads that so many millions of people went to their death, I can only think of trying to play Kaddish by Ravel.
The orchestra travels quite extensively, and I believe that Israel has to show its cultural side to that part of the world that even accepts us. Sometimes we find ourselves very isolated in far corners of the world, and I will never forget the time in 1972, September, Sao Paulo. We just received the news of the tragedy at the Olympic Village in Munich. We felt ourselves very, very far away from home and unprotected. That night, the orchestra played a concert which I will never forget, because there was victory on the stage, victory in the music. They really played for their country that night. Now, we have a lot of talent in Israel. We don't know at this point whether the next three prodigies that we are going to introduce to you will go to the top one day, but they are surely extremely talented. Shira Rabin, Sharon Kam, Maya Veltman. Maya has already performed with the London Philharmonic, and I know she is going places. Now I sing. Accompanying Sharon Kam playing Mozart, I know I'm in the presence of greatness. Shira Rabin came to Israel as a child from Russia, is completely Israeli trained, and has something very, very spiritual about her. The Israel Philharmonic is really a conglomeration of chamber musicians. We have more than 12 professionally functioning chamber music ensembles in the orchestra. And they not only go all over the world giving concerts, but they also, in Israel, play in regular series in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and occasionally they also give concerts for the army. The Philharmonic plays for a variety of audiences. Concerts for the armed forces, our regular subscribers, which number 36,000 in all, children's concerts, and members of kibbutzim sitting out in the open enjoying classical music.
There's just no limit to the talent that one has in this country. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think the orchestra could almost play by themselves. And once they almost proved this with Daniel Barenboim and myself looking on.
We are, as Shakespeare says in Henry V, a band of brothers. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. And talking of brotherhood, what better piece to signify what we are all about than when we play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in front of the walls of Jerusalem.